Hey everyone, hello. Hey everyone, how are my lovelies today? Oh, okay. I forgot I put the little chat window thing in. So now the chat window displays the chat. Hello. Okay, let me just get a little bit set up. Hey Morgan, can you hear me? Okay. Sorry, it always seems like a mad dash whenever I do this. So, yes. So, cool. Morgan can hear me. Cheers, everyone. Today I have, this is going to sound really, really classy. It's Bucks Fizz, but with apple juice instead of orange juice. I don't know what you call that. Devonshire Fizz? I don't know. Yeah, it's real classy. But I need it to apple fizz. Yeah, maybe apple fizz. I don't know why Bucks is orange in. Is the music too loud as well? I can turn that down if it's annoying because I can't hear anything. So as always, I'm going to start the stream saying, hi, I'm Rick RG Wood. I run my imprint, Grizzly Eye Games, through which I publish PDFs, or as I like to call them, monographs, because I'm that fancy, on the Dungeon Masters Guild. I'm also sorry, I've done something a bit cheesy today, so because I need to use my. You can barely. Okay, cool. So Morgan says she can barely hear the music, which is good. Oh dear, I'm using chat. Yes, I've just, as you can see here, this is grizzlyeye.com, where you can buy all my stuff. Please do buy The Vermin, it's out now. I'm really proud of it. It is like 10 pages of new monsters, a dungeon, some lore, some blurb, some lovely illustrations from some very talented writers and artists. So yes, actually I'm going to move this off screen so you can't see it because it's distracting. So this is my chat is messing up. Why are you messing up? Okay, that's better. It's back. Okay, so chat in my phone is back. I've got my browser. So we can get started. So this is my game design chat. This is the third game design live stream I've had so far. So each fortnight rather, I come online, I chat to you lovely people, I talk about what I've been doing, what I've been looking at, and I do a little piece of game design. At the moment, this for my upcoming new campaign, The Last Post. So I'm currently running one 5th edition campaign, Black Griffin, of which I have a few players hopefully will be joining us today. And I am also gearing up to run my next 5th edition. Okay, Liam's just said he's tried to log in, but it won't let him chat. Are you actually logged in? Because I can see. I can't see you. I can see there's 2 viewers, but I can't see you, Liam. So maybe Okay, cool. Liam's saying I'm gaming at the moment, so he can't join in. So he's messaging me on Discord while he says that. Okay, so so part of it's just chat. So I as I warm up and hopefully get more viewers, I'll be talking about some of the things I've been doing over the last fortnight, and then we'll probably do a piece of game design. And this week, I'm hoping we can touch on a new background, which is a bit of a tricky subject, which I shall get to later, because backgrounds aren't easy to write. The dog's coming up. Oh, okay, that's nice. Okay, so what I've been looking at this week. What I've been looking at is Doom Patrol. So this is another of my... I'm actually fully obsessed with Doom Patrol. It's probably... We talked about Warrior Nun last time, and this is in a very similar vein. It's sort of a superhero TV show. So Doom Patrol is a pretty obscure DC comic that had a good run in the 60s, got revived in the 80s, and I think is having a third renewal in the noughties or tens. I don't know what you call the tens, but yeah. Unfortunately, I can't show you a trailer because last time I tried to show a trailer, my YouTube upload got blocked with Warrior Nun, so I had to remove that section. So you can see this is a publicity still. Yeah, so Morgan's saying George and I keep meaning to watch that. Yeah, it's honestly, I was gushing about Warrior Nuns, but I'm going to gush even more about Doom Patrol. I'm just don't know how to really describe it. So the original Doom Patrol is sort of like a sort of semi-surrealist take on the superhero genre, with a bunch of bizarre and absurd superheroes who aren't really superheroes. They're just people who have been afflicted, traumatized, accidentally fallen into their powers, and they're not really, they don't want them, they don't really find them particularly useful. So this is like a TV show, and so this is the second season of this. So the first season, I was like, this looks so rubbish. The trailers look cheap, it looked cheap, and it is cheap. The first season, they spent no money on it, but it just goes a fair old knot, and it just drags you in. It's pretty strong. It's got a really strong cast. It's high superhero nonsense, and it's all sorts of, and it's not really superhero nonsense. It's all like they encounter something metaphysical, something happens, they sort of get out of it. Mostly not through their own skill, just through happenstance. And I really like Doom Patrol. It's really difficult to talk about this without showing the trailer. You can see the main characters here. So there's Cliff, the robot man who died in a car crash. His brain was saved into a robot machine. My favourite is Crazy Jane, which is probably not a great term for her, but she has it's a really wonderful piece of world building that she has split personality syndrome, and about 30 or 40 split personalities living within her, and each time she manifests one of these personalities she gets a new superpower, and the superpower is dependent on the personalities, and they all live in a sort of metaphysical space inside her head called the Underground. And without spoiling it too much, one of the best episodes in first season is when Jane, who is not in fact the name of the person whose body she inhabits, but is just one of the personalities, the primary in this case, is dragged back to the Underground to face some of the other personalities. And yeah, it was just a fantastic episode. I really rate it. So what else I've been looking at? Okay, so what have I been... I've been reading this at the moment. So, the Kobold Guide to Game Design. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm not a super big fan of this. So this was recommended to me by... I watched some tabletop role-playing YouTube video by an established designer in the industry who works for Paizo, who are the guys behind Pathfinder. Morgan's saying I need to pick up some books on tabletop role-playing game design. Don't pick this one up. It is a book of essays. So that's already a problem for me. So I've actually already read some of the Kobold. So they've done a series of these. So Kobold Press, you probably have never even heard of them. They had their big start in the D20 bubble. So they were one of the publishers that made use of open game license to write D20 material for Dungeons and Dragons. And they survived the not the dot-com crash, the D20 crash, when, you know, I don't know if Morgan, you were here, or any of the viewers were here for it, but it was a period in time. OGL basically, Wizards of the Coast licensed all the Dungeons and Dragons rules under an open source license, which meant as long as you abided by that license, you could write your own material for Dungeons and Dragons. Although at least the parts of Dungeons and Dragons they had released under the OGL, they didn't release all of it, they released a subset of it. And they also had a separate trademark license for D20, which meant you could publish material compatible, not necessarily with Dungeons and Dragons, but with D20. And the market just exploded. They were like books about everything. It's sort of like the DM's Guild, but if the DM's Guild was like a bricks and mortar shop, it was crazy amounts of stuff out there. And it was all like it actually was really bad because most of the material was unplayable, unplay tested, garbage, and basically it like all bubbles, it burst, and a number of publishers went out of business. Cold Press survived the coal, and now they are writing books on game design. They've written other stuff on world building. I can't remember what else they've done. Adventure design probably. And so I bought this book on the basis that it was a generic tabletop role-playing book, but it is generic game design book for like all games, and that's how the guy sold it to me. His YouTube video worked, but it isn't. It is predominantly about tabletop role-playing games, and it isn't even about game design. It's about publishing. There's very little game design material in it, and it's more about how to publish tabletop role-playing material, which is kind of odd because the advice isn't that great. It's basically aimed at publishing stuff professionally, i.e. you want to write for one of the big publishers, Wizards of the Coast. I don't know who else is a big publisher in the Dungeons and Dragons space at the moment. Paizo probably, who published Pathfinder, they're probably still quite big. Probably not Kobold Press, however. So it doesn't really offer, like for beginners, it's not super helpful for starters. Also, I'm not a big fan of books of essays. I've read their other books of essays, and I found them a bit bitty, a bit lacking in advice. I think with like essay books, you need to have like one or two really good. The problem is with essay books is that most essays are garbage, and like, yeah, you might have the odd good essay, but in a book full of essays, chances are you're going to have like 2 or 3 garbage essays before you get to something that might actually be useful, or at least that's my experience. Excuse me. So the odds are that you're going to get to like 2 or 3 essays and just throw the book away. That's nearly what I did. I got like halfway through it before I just stopped reading it. But that's a general problem with essay. The problem with this is that it's largely written by Kobold Press staff members, in-house game designers. In particular, most of essays seem to be by Wolfgang Bauer, who must be one of the head writers at Kobold Press. And basically it's advice about how to write. Basically what that means is it's basically a book on how to write for Kobold Press, which is already a pretty narrow market. I guess it's also a book for, doing professional publishing in the tabletop role-playing industry. But again, that's kind of weird because I think in the book they admit themselves there's only like 80 individuals working full-time in the industry for which this book might be useful for, and most of those, as the book says, are sitting in cubicles at the Seattle offices of Wizards of the Coast. Morgan's saying, is there a design book that you would recommend? I actually do have some. hang on, in my wish list, which also came recommended, but they were by the same guy, so take that with a pinch of salt. Yeah, so The Art of Game Design is one that came recommended, and that's probably what I might read next. And Characteristics of Games, but that looks really... These are both, but those are like proper textbooks. They're not cheap either. So I don't know if I would recommend... I haven't read them either, so I can't recommend them. But my biggest bugbear with this is it's really anti what it calls amateur publishing, and it links amateur publishing with indie publishing. And as an indie publisher, obviously, I'm not super happy about that. Yeah, I'm not super happy about that. They do that a lot, and they're like, well. The other thing that I'm not super happy about, which I'm trying to grasp right now as I flip through this, I should probably just put it down and focus on the task at hand, which is drinking this and talking to you lovely people. The other problem with it is I'm not really sure the advice is that good. So the focus of the book is that your game should be marketable first and foremost, and that you should be writing material for a market. If you just write material for yourself, you are not a professional, you are an amateur. Which is kind of problematic in lots of ways. I mean, not problematic, it's kind of... That feels like really bad advice. That feels like a recipe for mediocrity, in my opinion. I think that what they're sort of saying is that you should be designing stuff that is not too offbeat, that follows the conventions of the mainstream industry and sells to people. And I guess if you want to make money, maybe that's the way to do it, although I can't really see how anyone except the already established publishers might get in on that. I guess you could break into the market, but to be honest, I can't think of any new publishers that have done in recent years. So that's kind of annoying, and I think it focuses on stuff like... well, one thing that really annoyed me is they specifically start saying about world building and settings. And they're specifically talking about marketability, and they say you want to make your world building as generic as possible. You want to appeal to a mainstream audience, and they specifically cite Dark Sun as an example of something that is different but had a very small market, which I found incredible advice for two reasons. One reason, no, you shouldn't. I mean, we have a complete surfeit of generic Dungeons and Dragons land high fantasy settings. We have loads of them. They're all pretty samey. They're not covering any new ground. They move the furniture a little bit, but they don't do anything new. Games like Dark Sun really did do something new. They did something quite hard. They took the Dungeons and Dragons land formula and translated it into something completely different. Morgan's just posted HURH. I don't know what that stands for, Morgan. Her. Yeah, I wasn't super pleased with that advice. I think that's really bad advice. I think we do need to... There's a difference between publishing for a market, mass market, and pandering to a mass market. And you can continue to pander to the market and give people what they already have 100 times over. And I suppose there is a market for that. But if you want to do something meaningful, and to be honest, let's face facts, if you're getting into tabletop role-playing games, you're not doing it for the money, you're doing it because you love it. Why would you settle for mediocrity? Why would you settle for yet another? Morgan's saying it's the sound one makes when one is confused. Sorry, Morgan, am I confusing you? I'm going a mile a minute. I can repeat something if I'm not being very clear, which I probably not. I'm rambling a lot. So yeah, so I don't think it's great advice. I think he's talking about giving people what they already have, which is large tomes filled with high fantasy stuff, which is highly verbose, and there was a comment on making the setting generic. Yeah, which part of that? Sorry, I hope I haven't insulted anyone. I mean, I think, you know, there is a place. I'm not trying to say that all high fantasy is generic. Oh, what they said, yeah. I mean, I can sort of see where they're coming from. I mean, so Kobold Press produced this monstrosity, which has actually got highly rated, the Tome of Beasts. But you can see here, there's no way. This is never going to be used by anyone. There's already more monsters in the monster manual than I've ever been able to get through in 4 years of role playing 5e that I've been doing. So people don't need this. This is pandering to an audience that expects large tomes, and this is sort of why I'm sort of moving perhaps towards the indie. And I generally try, and I've actually had bad reviews for some of my stuff because it is so short, but that's sort of deliberate. I think you shouldn't be building role-playing games by giving your freelancers, oh, we need X thousands of words for this, because then you just end up with thousands of words. But anyway, so actually, I'm actually going to get rid of this. I'm going to probably recycle it or send it to the second-hand bookshop. But if anyone wants it, slide into my DMs and let me know, and I'll be happy to post it to you rather than waste it. I'm certainly not going to keep it. There is nothing of value in it. Okay, so the Old Guard. Yes, so the other thing I've been looking at this week is the Old Guard, which is Netflix's new blockbuster film that dropped, I think it was last Friday. Charlize Theron headlining as a immortal who likes to get involved in wars and kill people. I actually really like this. Oh, Morgan said they watched it today. How did you find it, Morgan? I actually didn't mind this. I have some criticisms, but they're not related to the quality of it. It was entertaining, it buzzed through quite nicely, it all made sense, it had a beginning and a middle and an end, and to be honest with you, with some films, that's a big ask right there. So yeah, I was pretty happy with that. Yeah, Morgan's saying, not exception anyway, not terrible either. Yeah, that's pretty much how I scan it, which again, that in itself seems to be a bit of an achievement for modern cinema, that something is just okay. Most things are just terrible. So yeah. I mean, I'm not going to... I did a tweet about this where I poked fun at it, at some of the politics, which is a bit dubious. It's... The best way I can describe it is that it's an intensely militaristic film. It's very pro-military intervention. Yeah, that's all I can really say about it, really. That there's lots of... They are a group of immortal soldiers who go about from country to country getting involved in wars, nominally to stop wars. They want to create peace, but weirdly enough, because wars don't stop. Why is that? Who could be intervening in all these wars and causing all this chaos? It couldn't be the Old Guard, could it? Of course, that never occurs to them. Yeah, Morgan's saying I agree with that. Yeah, it's intensely pro-military, to the point where there was a scene where they're in Afghanistan, where it's basically an advert for the US military, coalition forces. Although I didn't actually think the coalition was still a thing in Afghanistan, which was shocking for me in the first place. But yeah, there's a scene where there's some American soldiers trying to find, I guess, a terrorist. They're trying not to kill anyone. They're all very humanitarian and very careful and very not trying to kill anyone. It's all very, they're all very serious, and they're not soldiers. They're more peacekeepers. And yeah, I'm not sure I agree. I don't know. Yeah, that was not. That was. I mean, yeah, I wasn't particularly happy about that. So. The Old Guard. So yeah, I mean, if you ignore the politics of it, it's not bad. It's got a good cast. Yeah, The Old Guard, available now on Netflix. This is a short one, so I'm actually going to post this in chat. Yes, so this is a Kickstarter I backed today. Dagger Dagger, which is a dark fantasy sci-fi comic anthology. And one of the people in it is Goran Gligovic. Sorry, excuse me. Bubbles in the Prosecco, I do apologise. Goran Gligovic, who is one of my favourite artists online. If you're not following him, I suggest you do. I think you should see... I retweeted him today, so if you go to my Twitter feed, @GrizzlyEye, you should be able to find him. He's very talented, he's very funny, and you can see here some of the artwork, and this is amazing. I'm really looking forward to this. I've admired his work for a long time. This is Goran's work here, and the other work looks amazing, so I'm very excited to see this. I think it's met its goals already. I think it just got released today. It's got 29 days to go, so they should be making their money and with interest. So I'm pretty happy about that for them. Are there any stretch goals? No stretch goals. I've ordered the print copy and I'm looking forward to getting that. If you have the money, I suggest you back it too. Yes. Okay, so what else? So I think that's all the stuff I've been looking at this week. So I'm going to cover what is new in Grizzly Eye Games world. What have I been doing for Grizzly Eye Games this week? What have I been doing in general is I got a haircut is what I did get, which was a relief. I made the trip into London nervously and finally got a haircut, which I haven't had since February, so that was a blessed relief. I'm really glad about it. I was just waking up with it all in my face and it was very irritating, so yeah, that's good. What else? Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of work on the last post, probably too much work on the last post, but I have been doing some work on the last post. In particular, I've been polishing up the player's guide for the last post. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear that. Oh yeah, thank you, Morgan. She's displayed the Dagger Dagger retweet. Sorry, they have displayed the Dagger Dagger retweet. So one thing I'm proud of, so you can see here, this is the player's guide. One thing I'm proud of is I've managed to get the setting and a summary of the rules on 2 pages. So this is a sort of very sort of high level summary of the Low Kingdoms, which is going to be my sort of medieval dark low fantasy setting, generic setting for this. And we're specifying on the Western Hinterlands, which is a sort of Borderlands-like area that the campaign is set in. And I've got the character details here with an overview of the rules. Sorry, I really need to stop drinking Prosecco for this stuff. Yeah, which is, I don't know if you see my Black Griffin player's guide, you probably have, if you're one of my players. This is sort of forked off that, but updated with a number of things of interest, of which the main ones, which I'm also really happy about, are the factions. So this is my factions chapter, and these are summaries of all the factions I have. The Merciful Company, the Silver Rose, which we covered last time. I've sort of hit upon a final... Morgan's saying, how did you decide what goes in the player's guide? That's a really good question. I don't know. I guess I'm focusing on the highlights. It's really difficult. I don't know if there's any real answer to that. It's sort of... it's more sort of art than science, I guess. I just sort of think about a lot of this is heavily inspired by the Black Griffin, which I use as a template for this. So what worked in the Black Griffin I sort of copied across here, and what didn't work I've sort of left, and I've tried to, I guess, focus on the core elements, and these sort of subheadings here sort of highlight that. Chaos waxes, so in the Black Griffin, magic is waning, and magic isn't exactly on the wax here, but chaos certainly is. Dark forces, nor at the edges of the Low Kingdoms. Monsters thought long dead stir, crawling from beneath ruins to harrow the common folk. Yeah, so it's much more traditional Dungeons and Dragons, which I sort of wanted to play around with. Yeah, it's just sort of the highlights. I don't know. Like, I wanted to focus on witch queens and kings and queens. So the main story point in the last post is that in ages gone by, magic was everywhere, but it was terrible. It wasn't a high magic age. You would imagine all these powerful sorcerers, necromancers, warlocks, witches. They caused chaos. They used their powers to dominate the world, and with them they brought a cacophony of spirits, curses, bloody wars, and chaos. That period is gone. Maybe. Yeah, that's what I wanted to focus on. So it's about really figuring out what you want the game to be about, and then putting the highlights here. I've got some Low Kingdom slang, which you might recognise from the Black Griffin. I'll get to that because this replicates a lot of stuff in the Black Griffin Player's Guide. And I'll get to what I've done with that because I sort of split this up a bit. Last post characters, yeah, standard unique backgrounds, low magic characters. I've added a section on grim characters, so I'm jazzing up my. So I wrote an alternative human race called the Grim Folk, which obviously they're a bit grittier than regular human characters in Dungeons and Dragons. So yeah, and then the factions I'm pretty happy with. I'm really happy with these because I managed to fit them all onto one page, which I think when you're designing this, it's really important to think about how it's going to be read. Like, there's a lot of information here, especially in the factions, and I don't expect players to read all the factions. I expect them to look at this, see a faction they like, go to that, and then read it up on it. I'm also really happy with. See, this is Awards of the West, which I think is getting into a really good state. I'm really happy with this. I think it's a pretty solid faction. The Royal Society of Magic, which is my magic guild. The Merciful Company of the Silver Rose, which will be my my fighter guild, or General Adventurer guild. Morgan saying love slang guides in a setting. Yeah, I did this in Black Griffin. This was an aside, but I think my players like that the most. Again, all this, you don't really realise that how much of what you do when you're doing game design is world building. Like, coming up with slang is like great world building. So we have the new gods are the gods of men who replace the old gods, who are the sort of dragons, archfey, giants of a previous era of chaos. They've sort of faded away, and the new gods have taken control of the world. They gave birth to humankind. So you have by the father and by the mother, which are curses, blasphemous exclamations. And we have by the bastard. So who is the bastard? The bastard is actually the illegitimate offspring of the father, the new god, disowned. So how does he play a role in all of this? Yeah, so I'm pretty happy with this. I think coming along here, the follower tables, which I've been working on, but it's coming up to shape. I think I'm a few weeks away. The only thing I'm missing is I need to add a couple of backgrounds to this. One of the backgrounds will detail today. Oh, that's not good. The back stripe here at the top, I need to fix that. I need to. I think I've got the Thieves' Council fairly well developed, but I think we'll need to do another one of these world building game design sessions for the Temple of the New Gods, because that's a really important one. If you have like religious or clerical characters, or even clerics, or religious fighters, they'll want to be members of the temple, a sort of Catholic Church-like entity that dominates that crosses boundaries and challenges the authority of the nobility. So yeah, pretty happy with that. What else I've been looking at? What else is new? I didn't get to do a blog post, which is increasingly a pattern I'm seeing, although honestly the blog post didn't really get me much. I'm not really sure. I was blogging for a good 2 or 3 years on a regular basis, and I don't think it really built much up. I think I need to think a lot more about marketing, so I didn't blog. I've been tweeting. I'm focusing much more on tweeting, and I tweeted a write-up, a preliminary write-up. So I'm writing a book on factions, and one of the things I was doing was perhaps trying to write up factions for some of the organisational subclasses. So some of the subclasses have organisational type deals, like there's the colleges of the bards, which are normally supposed to be subclasses, but they sort of say you can just use as subclasses, but you can also say these are real organisations you're members of. The circles of the Druids are one of those, and the other ones are the schools of magic that are wizard subclasses. So I wrote up a sort of tiny little block faction summary of the School of Evocation, which I was quite happy with, and I'm planning to do that for others, but as a replacement to blogging. So Strongholds is something I've been playing with. So when I was doing faction stuff, one of the perks I've been adding is sort of strongholdy type stuff. So the Wardens of the West get a territory, and they get some advantages for that territory. They know the territory quite well. They get advantage on survival and stealth checks, which basically means they can. It's sort of like a mini fortress. It's a fortress without walls, in the sense that they and their allies get advantage on stealth, which means that attacking forces will be at a disadvantage all the time, and you can harry them, and that's a really nice idea. And the Merciful Company, the Silver Rose, the Mercies, as they're called. They get a camp. So if you get to a certain rank, you get awarded a camp, which is like a defensive mobile stronghold, and you can do things like train. And then there was a pattern that's coming out of this. There was like, I can sort of see there are 4 types of strongholds. Camps and territories are the 2 ones I've mentioned. Establishments, so like buildings, like non-fortified static buildings, perhaps in cities, so like thief headquarters, bard theatres, all kinds of things you could use that for. And then forts, which are obviously like castles and things like that. So yeah, so this is sort of teasing out a sort of rule system, and this is very tenuous. I'm not really sure about this at all. Yeah, so there's the types, and then I sort of thought, well, there's different benefits to each one, and I sort of created like types for each of the strongholds. So you have these qualifiers. So you have a fort, but you can have an arcane fort, or a governed fort, or a holy fort. So the type gives you sort of the structure of your stronghold, and then the type qualifier gives sort of like the supernatural or benefits of it. So I've had arcane, which I'm not really sure, gives you perhaps some kind of boost to your spellcasting power, or maybe makes it harder to wards you in some way, makes it harder for you to be targeted by spells. And governed is quite a good one, which means you govern your territory, which means you acquire wealth or taxes through it. So that's another good one. Holy is sort of divine equivalent of arcane. Military. Encampments give you like patrols, perhaps. So like if you're in your area of your stronghold, you're more likely to notice people sneaking up on you and be able to head off that, and maybe you get weapons. Secrets, which is like it's harder to find you. And tracked is the same as them, which is things like concealment, resting, and foraging, and much easier. And the divided into size, small, medium, large. Yeah, I'm not so sure about this. Some of these don't make sense. I think I need to be a bit careful with strongholds. There's a reason why strongholds aren't in Dungeons and Dragons anymore. I think the main problem with a stronghold, particularly a castle, is that you're supposed to be adventurers going out and exploring the world, but if you have a castle, you're not going to, are you? That's sort of the opposite. It's like, I've heard the phrase cursed design problem, in the sense that it's a contradictory design problem. Dungeons and Dragons' fundamental premise is, or one of its fundamental premises is that you adventure, and adventurers, it's best if they aren't tied down to any specific location, because it gets very hard to write adventures, and strongholds contradict that. The nice thing about some of the strongholds I've built for the factions is that camps and territories are what I like to think of as perhaps mobile strongholds. So you can pick up your camp and move it somewhere else, and you can track a new territory and make that your new territory and move the territory around. And I think that works, but I'm not sure how like static strongholds like establishments and forts are going to work, because they don't move, and that's going to be a bit, either your players aren't going to be interested in it, or they're just going to, they'll just ignore it, or they'll feel constrained and frustrated by it. And yeah, so Matt Colville did a lot of work in this. Literally, he wrote the book on this, Strongholds and Followers. His solution is basically that strongholds give you powers, like proper like class feature type powers, which I think is a way around that. You have your stronghold, you can go back and visit your stronghold, but while you're away from your stronghold, you still see the benefits of it. But it's very high fantasy, and obviously I'm not into high fantasy. The most interesting thing is the stronghold downtime activities, which I think is probably the most interesting aspect of it. The most important one is muster forces, which allows you to basically... let me just see what the lighting situation's like. Is that too bright? I think that's better. It just gets really gloomy in here very quickly. Yeah, muster forces is a good one, which basically allows you to create new followers, military followers. Oh, thank you, Morgan. Morgan's a live test. That's fine, thank you. And maintaining strongholds. So I sort of feel like so downtime activity comes into its full with factions, I think. So I'm quite happy with some of this stuff, but I don't know. It really depends if my players will actually use. I'm going to play test this stuff, and I'll be interested to see how my players react to having strongholds. So raise stronghold is probably actually not something that's actually doesn't belong here. Build defenses. So build defenses is just increasing the defenses of your stronghold, which means adding things like walls and new towers and bailiffs and things like that. Muster forces is very similar. It allows you to create units using your stronghold. So you could raise like a unit of light infantry or what have you. Raise a stronghold is quite powerful. That's literally creating a new stronghold, but I don't think just anyone should be able to do that. And maintain stronghold is quite so I'm sort of seeing a way that like you can't just leave your stronghold. Like if you leave your stronghold alone too long, you lose it. So you need to do a maintain stronghold downtime activity. Not sure about that one. Just what else? Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So let me check my messages. Not having many followers today, which is a bit sad. Maybe I need to advertise these a bit more. So, what time is it? It is... Oh, I've gone for an hour almost, 50 minutes, and we're only just getting to the actual heart of the matter, which is the game design. So, I'm trying to gather my thoughts here. So I want to create two new backgrounds for the last post, which is this is a big ask, because designing backgrounds, while they're probably one of the simplest parts of the Dungeons and Dragons design, at least mechanically, they're actually really hard to create meaningful new ones, because the ones in the player's handbook are pretty generic as they are. So like, I have tried to create backgrounds. One example I can think of is a fanatic background I tried to create. Let me just find the background section, but that's already covered by the acolyte. If you look, you can roll up a fanatic acolyte, you can play a fanatic acolyte. And like things like criminal, they're all pretty generic, and it's very hard to find any space in it. Hang on, let me check. I feel like I'm missing chat. Okay. So you have to tread carefully. I'm a big believer that if you're doing a piece of game design, it needs to work on its own merits. It needs to be distinct enough from everything else. There's no point creating a fanatic background if it already treads on the toes of the acolyte. You're not really doing anything. You're not giving the players anything they really want. So I want two new ones for the last post. One of which is going to be the forest folk. So they're various inhabitants of the Western Hinterlands, of which Starlings are one of them, which are sort of the bandits that inhabit that region and have formed together to sort of, due to the lawlessness of the area, they're formed together into larger bands, almost kingdoms. Warlords really is what they are. And then there are the forest folk. So they're sort of like a Pictish kind of peoples. So they live in the forests, they are clannish, they are sort of almost, they're human, but they're touching on the Fae. They hold with the old ways. They're sort of like basically the Pictish people of the Celts, so sort of primordial inhabitants of this country. The who probably created Druidism, were Druids or had Druids as part of them. So that's a tricky one, because I think that's already pretty much covered by the Outlander background in the Dungeon Master's Guide. I don't know if we'll probably cover this in future, but I don't know if the Outlander sort of covers all of that already, which is a shame. Yeah, it does really. The Outlander's really sort of barbarian type background. Maybe I can create, you can create sub background. I mean, it might be better just to sort of map existing backgrounds to sort of cultural areas. So you might say forest folk are Outlander can be Outlander, or it can be, whatever. I don't know. I think there might be, but so then there's the Borderlander, which I think there is a stronger contention for. So there are the Starlings, who are very chaotic. There are the forest folk, who are sort of neutral, I suppose they have their own laws, but they're the laws of the old ways, not the laws of the Low Kingdoms and the new gods. And then you have the Borderlanders, the Hinterlanders. When this is called the Westerly Reaches, they were going to be called the Reachers, but that's a really bad name. So what are they? They are the people who they're sort of halfway between civilized and the forest folk, perhaps. They are the people who have come to settle the hinterlands, or perhaps they were born in the hinterlands. So the hinterlands is largely unmapped wilderness, and there are a few settlements. So the people who live there are Borderlanders. Yeah, and that's sort of tricky. So there's a couple of design issues I want to avoid here. I don't want the Borderlanders to be cowboys, Wild West, which is sort of what they're edging towards. I sort of want them to be perhaps initially I envisioned them being a little bit wild. I think the basic thing I'm looking for with the Borderlanders is that they aren't wild, they're civilized, they follow laws, but they are desperate people. They live at the edge of civilization with enemies all around them. They're sort of carved out, holding for themselves, but they're just clinging on by their fingertips. They could be wiped out at any moment. They're not necessarily, they're sort of, some of them are forest folk who've moved out of forests and lived in villages. Some of them are outcasts from the Low Kingdoms, not necessarily criminals, perhaps political or religious outcasts, or they're people who grew up in the Borderlands, somehow managed to survive. So it's kind of like a survivalist kind of vibe. Yeah. Yeah, so this is all pretty out of date. They wear animal masks, thorn bracelets, but that's not true. They don't necessarily follow the old ways, I guess. So Morgan's saying like frontier pioneers. Yeah, I mean I can see the comparison, but that's perhaps the comparison I want to avoid with its perhaps it's more accurate to say they are on the frontier, but perhaps they grew up on the frontier, or they've been placed in the frontier by accident. Yeah, maybe frontier pioneers. I don't really see the Western lands as a frontier, though. I see it as it's a tricky one. This is a tricky one. It is a tricky one, so this is why I'm asking you guys for help. So, they're not wild, they are lawful. So let's say they're lawful. Make a list of stuff. So outcasts of Low Kingdoms. Actually, let's make this a list. That makes things easier. Low Kingdoms, heretics, political dissidents, refugees from the... And then perhaps also outcasts of forest folk. Maybe lawful / neutral. Or maybe just neutral. So Morgan's saying maybe a little bit like homesteaders. Sounds more established in Lantern. Yeah, sort of. Let's put that down. Frontier. Homesteaders. So outcasts of the forest folk, and I'm going to use the word desperate because I think that's the key word here, is that the Borderlands are a desperate, cursed people. They've survived, but only by the nail. They're tough as nails, but I think with the Wild West, tough as nails means they're thriving. I think you think of people in the Wild West, they may be under the boot of desperate desperados and corrupt sheriffs, but the Borderlanders are crushed, or they're about to be crushed. They are pale, they are thin, they are starving, they are fearful. Maybe that kind of vibe. I don't know. What do you think? Is that playable? Desperate, frightened, starving, pale. Paranoid, maybe. Frontier homesteaders, outcast of forest folk. Families who survived in the Borderlands, despite the odds. Not Borderlands, but Hinterlands. One other thing is I want this perhaps to try... At the moment this is aimed at... Borderlander means Hinterlander, means inhabitant of the Western Hinterlands. But if it's at all possible, I'd like to make this background generic enough that it can be reused elsewhere. I don't know if that's possible, but we'll see. So Morgan has some notes, which, as always, they are very useful. Problem with this desperation outside is you have to have that come from the environment. Something is stopping them from flourishing. Maybe it's a landscape. They've been driven into a kind of desert. I mean, that's fairly easy. Yeah. Yeah, so I think that I can easily, yeah, so there's definitely going to be the hinterlands are dangerous, first and foremost. So you have the Starling Kings and Queens, the large bands of bandits that inhabit these parts, some warlords that inhabit these parts, growing forces, they wax and wane, but they're always a constant background radiation of noise. You have forest folk who are not necessarily friendly. Oh dear, I do apologise. I really need to stop drinking Prosecco with these things. You have the Fae, perhaps, who's sort of crawling out of the woods, and of course, like the Low Kingdoms is already a dangerous place, but kept underhand by the nobles and the Royal Society of Wizards and the armies. But the Western Hinterlands don't have any of that. So the chaos crawling out of the borders of this world is here. So I think you can think of the Borderlanders as victims of chaos, really. Yeah, bandit kings and not necessarily a native set of monsters, but I think there are monsters. I don't want to get too much because it might be spoilers. Maybe you should put that in. Under threat. Sorry, I'm going to cough. I promise I don't have COVID. I'll just take a sip. Under threat from Starlings, which are warlords, bandits, and that's when I say warlords. That I mean, some of the ones I have in mind for this campaign setting are particularly nasty. Forest folk who are either ambivalent, indifferent, or hostile to the Borderlanders attempting to encroach their territory. The old gods, the Fae / old gods. Well, the Fae are separate, and even though there's a tricky relationship between the Fae and the old gods. Even though the old gods includes Archfey, maybe the old ways, or maybe that covers the forest folk / old ways, because I think the forest folk are the main followers of the old ways, and the Fae, and miscellaneous horrors. Yeah. I don't know, how do you feel about that, guys? Would anyone want to play that? It's a key question online. Oh. Let me just close my yeah. I think that's is that flavourful enough? Is that simple enough? Morgan asks a very pertinent and good question. What keeps them continuing despite threats? It's a really good question. I don't really know. Why would the Borderlanders stick around in the Borderlands? I mean, some of them are outcasts, so they don't have any choice. Yeah, maybe that's it. They're just outcasts. Although, why would we call them Borderlanders? Maybe what I'm generating here is actually an outcast's background. I mean, that's why they're there. They are rejects of forest folk or the Low Kingdoms, or even the wastes far to the west, or they are the children of them, descendants of people who have been outcast and who didn't join the Starlings. So why wouldn't they join the Starlings? I mean, I don't know if they are outcasts. I mean, I think they are outcasts, and I know Borderlanders. Not all outcasts are Borderlanders. Some outcasts are just outcasts. Also, outcasts is a category that sort of includes bandits and might also include the Starling Kings. Although, again, perhaps the categories are soft categories that a a Borderlander could turn into a Starling in the same way that a Forest Folk could turn into a Borderlander, and indeed some Borderlanders join the Forest Folk, so maybe it's more of a category then. While I mull that over, I'm going to get rid of this because this is old stuff. So originally I imagine them wearing animal masks, wearing like quite sort of I don't want to say rustic, sort of more like, I guess the closest example is perhaps, well then maybe this is a good one, is the Wicker Man, kind of that sort of pagan kind of way of dressing. But that's covered by the Wardens of the West, who wear. So I see them wearing like animal masks or feathered cloaks, or wearing stuff made out of natural materials, or very sort of bare bones, not like weaving stuff, but like feathered cloaks made out of feathers. But I feel like that's already covered by the Wardens, who have their very animal masks crafted out of twigs, branches, leaves and feathers. And I imagine the Forest Folk that's sort of an old gods kind of thing, the Forest Folk old ways kind of thing. The Forest Folk follow the old ways. What I do have, I'm quite happy with the skills and proficiencies, stealth and survival, which sort of gels well with their sort of homesteading and having to hide from people, raiders. Tool proficiencies, so I see them quite handsy, so they have like 2 tool proficiencies, although I'm not really sure tool proficiencies are that powerful. Maybe this needs to be buffed a bit. Equipment, a hunting trap, a set of traveller's clothes, a mess kit. The equipment with backgrounds is always really tough. Unless you create new items of equipment, it's really difficult to find out with something that's quite interesting with the equipment. Having deleted all that stuff, it leaves me with... Actually, no, they're lawful neutral. So there's one other thing which I sort of touched upon last week and I've been thinking about a lot, is aesthetic. And I think that's a really important game design thing to think about, because how do you make something look... How do you make things distinct enough that they're memorable? Like, it's one thing to say that someone's a Borderlander, and it's another thing to say what that means from a story perspective. It's quite another thing as to how you imagine that thing or that person. What does a member of the Royal Society of Magic look like? And they could look like anything. I need to figure that out. I need to create an aesthetic for them. I've sort of done that with the Wardens of the West. They are obviously very earth-tony. They wear these masks, of animal masks made of natural materials that drop from the shrine of their nominal patron spirit, Lord of the Hunt. So Borderlanders need their own aesthetic, so that if you describe a Borderlander, people know what you're talking about. Like, you can identify them, which is important for any number of reasons. Like, if you want your factions or your game fluff design to be memorable, it needs a strong aesthetic. That's tricky to do if you don't have artists and stuff, and if you don't have artists, layout design, and all the other creative things, you have to do it just with writing, and that's really hard to do. How do you convey some sort of strong visual identity just with writing? And you need to be really, I guess you need to be quite brute force with it and just be really obvious and just say, well, someone with this hat, for example, is that person, and then, it makes it a little easier. So what is the aesthetic of the Borderlanders? That's an open question, I've got no idea. I think pale, unhealthy looking. I don't know, I mean the obvious one is to make them dress in black, but that's just so lazy. Especially like gritty fantasy. Everything's black this, black that, black griffin, black coats, black guards. It's a bit of a cheap technique to make everything the colour black. Let me just start a new aesthetics. Maybe grey. Brown's already covered by the Wardens of the West. Sickly. I don't know if they'd all be sickly. Well, that's emaciated. Yeah, emaciated is a good word. Maybe there's something they do with their hair, like they shave their heads. Maybe they wear black maybe they wear like, not necessarily makeup actually thinking about it, but maybe they wear face masks. It's a very COVID, motley patched clothes. Yeah, I like patched clothes. Although some of this stuff, like emaciated patched clothes, is just general. It's just general peasant wear. So yeah. So again, this is why you need to be super careful with aesthetic, because the aesthetic has to be unique. If they just look like, so it's really easy to tread on other people's toes. So so things like sickly, emaciated and patched clothes tend to be, they're already associated. Maybe they could, but they're always already associated with peasants, but it doesn't mean that you could not combine that with another aesthetic to create the general aesthetic, and it wouldn't be touching. Although again, wearing face masks, I'm going to strike that out, because that is definitely touching on the toes of the Wardens of the West, who have masks, not just face masks. Patch clothes, emaciated, sickly grey. I mean, colour's an obvious one, but maybe not the best one, because there are only so many colours. And I've already used green for the Merciful Company of the Silver Rose. I've used brown for the Wardens of the West. I suspect I'm going to use blue for the Royal Society of Magic. Actually, the Thieves Guild, I don't know. Okay, so Morgan's saying, I keep coming back to the idea that it's like a beggar's encampment. That's a good one, yeah. They could be the beggar people. A society of beggars. What would a society of beggars look like? Okay, so dependent on the charity of the Low Kingdoms. Dependent on the Wardens of the West. Maybe they need the Wardens of the West. Maybe that's why they've suddenly ascended. That one of the Wardens of the West roles is to protect. So one of the goals of the beliefs of the Wardens of the West is that anyone who passes peacefully through the Western lands is under their protection. So maybe this society, that's how they survive, and the Wardens of the West are central to them because they protect them. Morgan makes a good point. If they've got a unified aesthetic, they've been around for a long while despite the threats against them. Yeah, I don't see them. I think they've been around for a while. Although they're a society of outcasts, they have been around for a while, so they might increase their ranks through outcasts, but that's not sustainable. They are mostly people who have lived in the Western Hinterlands for a while. They are the descendants of outcasts, but they've been there a while, and how did you say that? Been around for a while. Now let's move that up, because it's been around for neutral, outcast, been around for a while. Um, descendants of outcasts. I like the idea that they're in hock to the Wardens of the West. So maybe they feel a bit of sting of pride about that. Maybe there's a bit of resentment. Where did I make a note of that? Yeah, that's a nice one. Resentment. Yeah, I like that. They're dependent on the Wardens of the West, but not happy about it. They feel ashamed. Ashamed of that. But this isn't really aesthetic, this is more world building. Although maybe... ooh. So we could use lepers, the medieval leper societies, as a model for this, which is another alternative, or perhaps comes under the heading of... It might be interesting to do some research into leper culture. In the medieval era, see what that gives me an idea. But that still doesn't really touch upon it. So so lepers lived in communes. Morgan's saying, oh, now I'm thinking of Palestinian refugee camps. Yeah, I want to stay away from any real life ethnic similarities, which is not always easy. Morgan, what reminds you of what makes you think about Palestinian refugee camps? I suppose Palestinian refugee camps are quite communal. Is that perhaps what's got you thinking about that? Yeah, that's a good idea. So Morgan said they could be unified because of a common cultural background that's rejected by mainstream society. And in fact, there is precedent for that, which is, I think they're called the Cathars, who were a splinter group of the Catholic Church, I believe, a heresy that got quite a lot of traction for a while before they were... I don't know whether they were burned, but they certainly were brutally suppressed. Let me put that as a use. Morgan said common cultural background. That leads to outcast. So Cathars are one example of that. Morgan says, it's a resentment of the people they depend on, which will naturally force them to stay in a single area, even if it isn't good for them in the long run. Yeah. Maybe the resentment's the key here, because maybe that's what they are. The Borderlanders are the resentful people who live at the borders of everything, but are not participating in anything. Maybe resentment is key. Maybe resentment is the drive, is their identity. They are people who have been outcasts, either predominantly descendants of outcasts. They resent the fact they can't return to the Low Kingdoms. They resent the fact they are under constant attack by Starlings and Forest Folk, and they resent the fact that they are under the heel, or they're under the protection of the Wardens of the West. See, this is a tricky one. It's really slippery, and I'm not really... Resentment as identity. I feel they're quite a southern people. I could spell properly. Yeah, I think we've got enough food for thought here. I think what we're seeing here is one of the main problems of game design, which is that you're trying to find something, you're struggling, but you need to get it done, so you're trying to force it. But sometimes just leaving things to boil. I think we've got a lot of meat, got a lot of raw material here. But I think I'm struggling, and I think maybe it's time to put a pin in this and go away and think about it, and probably discuss it on the Discord with the other Last Post players. It's getting late now, and I'm starting to lose my voice as I often do by the time it's got to an hour and a half. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. Well, I'm not happy, but I think it's pointing in the right direction. I think there is. I think one of the answers I have answered is that, is there enough conceptual space for Borderlanders / Hinterlanders? I think there are. I don't think they're a subclass of Outcast. I think we can generate something truly separate. I think you can have an Outcast. An Outcast background could coexist with a Borderlander background. Borderlander background is not an Outlander. It's not a criminal. It is not any of the other. The closest relative is perhaps an Outlander, but I think they're more civilized than Outlanders. I think they're particularly wildernessy people. They're just, as Morgan says, homesteaders. They are creating isolated communities and trying to eke out a survival and return to the settlements near the keep to trade their goods. Yeah, Morgan says less foreign than Outlanders too. Yeah, I see them. Yeah, I don't want them to be like, so Forest Folk are truly outside Low Kingdom civilization. That's not to say they're uncivilized, but they don't follow the laws of they're not Low Kingdom people, but the Borderlanders, as the name suggests, sit on the border of Outlander and Low Kingdom. Yeah. In fact, let's make a note of that. Let's say Borderlanders live at the edge of civilization. They do not belong to, but let's just say they are not Outlanders, but neither are they members of Low Kingdom's society. Oh, Morgan says, "Eep, idea. Eep." Got me on tenterhooks now. They cultivate. They are not wildernessmen. Nor are they entirely civilized. I'm going to put civilized in quotation marks to represent the fact it is a loaded term. Ooh, yeah, that's a good one. Ah, okay, yeah, that is a good idea. Morgan's said, what if they're disliked because of their ancestors are the people that caused the downfall of the Wardens way back when? Actually, that's a good idea, but I actually think we can make that sure Spain with the Wardens take care of them now. Yeah, they could be linked to the Wardens. Okay, let me make a note of this. Let's make a general Outcasts heading here. And descendants of an unspeakable crime responsible for the harrowing of the Wardens. I actually think we could go one more than this, and we could in fact say, so specifically for the Hinterlands, that is the unspeakable crime. But in general, if we're going to create this as a general background, which I'm hoping I can use, that doesn't have to be tied to the last post, but I can put into some other more generic book. Maybe that's what the Borderlanders are. They are descendants, they are outcasts, they're criminals, whether that means criminals in the sense that they've committed crimes or they're just undesirables from mainstream society, but more importantly they're descendants of someone who committed an unspeakable crime, and so that weighs heavily on their shoulders. I like that. Burden. What else? What other words are associated with that? Guilt. What's the word where you make amends? They wanna. I can't remember the name. Undesirables isn't a bad name for background, actually. You're not wrong. Let's add that here as well. That's more generic. Could be just they're generally undesirables. Again, we're sort of coming back to a sort of outcasts background, to sort of reparations. Yeah, there's another word. It's like a religious word. That's close. Begins with an R. That they want to make amends. I'll just say make amends. I'm sure it'll come to me. Reparations, make amends. Let's see if I can spell. Interesting. Oh, I look terrible when I do that. It really makes my nose look big. Okay. So I think I'm quite happy with this. I think this needs a bit more work, and I might brainstorm this by myself, or even if Morgan has got the time, we could, and would be generous with their time, we could discuss this. But yeah, I'm pretty happy. I think we've come a long way. I still think it's still struggling to find its place. But I think we've got a few options. I think we can fix this. Okay, I think I'm done for tonight. I think I'm going to put a pin in that. So I'm going to sign off. As always, thank you for coming to listen to me ramble. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you join me again in the next fortnight. I want to thank Morgan for moderating today and for your lovely comments, which have been super helpful. Morgan is streaming every other week at the same time on their own Twitter channel. Okay, let me just put that in the chat. So give them a follow. You won't regret it. I'll be there as well. I'm always there moderating, so come along and say hi and you can chat to me. Morgan's saying next week writing the player's guide part 2. Yep. So Morgan is in the process of writing a player guide for her own really exciting campaign setting. So I'll be helping out there. So do come along to that. Also, one of my other players, Liam, is streaming his own role-playing games, live streaming them. 1 in 20, I think it's called, on YouTube. So I really recommend that. I'll put that link in the chat as well. So actually 2 of my players, Chris Sandley and part of that. They also do live playthroughs, but they also do other stuff. They do like playing the game type videos, which I think are really nice and bouncy and friendly and accessible. So check them out. As always, I'm RG Wood. I publish through my imprint, Grizzly Eye Games, on Dungeon Masters Guild, low fantasy squitty stuff. Go to grizzlyeye.com, check out my stuff, buy my latest PDF, The Vermin. It's really good value. It's only like £1.50, $2, less than $2. If you like what you've heard tonight, you can also follow me on Twitter or even on Twitch if you want to stay notified next time I stream. I'll also be reposting these videos on YouTube, so you can catch up on Twitch and you can catch up on YouTube. And tune in a fortnight, and I look forward to seeing you all then. Take care.